Hi, I'm Andrew Tsao. In this online edition of Backstory, we're going to preview a film called The Ends of the Earth. It's a film that has to do with speculative fiction, time travel, dystopian narrative, and a view of the future that's very specific. Rustin Thompson is the writer, producer, director, cinematographer, editor, and one of the actors in the film. We're very happy to have you here. So Russ,
thank you.
Lone wolf on this. Explain to me a little bit what that's all about, wearing multiple hats on a job like this.
Well, I come from a documentary filmmaking background where I've often been the sole person on a crew and the director, cinematographer, editor, writer. And I wanted to try that out in a fictional setting. I wanted to try making a feature film where I did it with as small of a crew as possible and as few as the mechanics of feature filmmaking as possible as well. Didn't want to spend a lot of money. And I decided I wanted to see if I could make a watchable, interesting feature film doing nearly all of the roles myself.
You know, I got to congratulate you for thinking out of the box and breaking the mold a little bit about how we perceive filmmaking to be done. The film is shot here in the Pacific Northwest. Nature plays a major role in the narrative. Can you talk a little bit about your relationship to the landscapes we're going to see in the film?
Well, I grew up in Washington State. I'm a native, and two of my favorite places have always been the Pacific Beach near Moclips, Washington. Okay. It's about 2.5 hours away from Seattle, and sort of the vast plateaus of the Palouse in eastern Washington. And every time I've driven through the eastern part of the state, I thought this would make a fabulous setting for a barren, futuristic, post-nuclear setting for a science fiction movie. And then in the town of Moclips, which if you've ever gone out there, it always looks deserted, even in summertime when there's people there. It always looks...
It's on the peninsula there.
It's on the peninsula, yeah. And it's about as far north as you can go before you hit a big Indian reservation. And even in the dead of summer, it looks deserted, and it looks like a biological plague has come through and wiped the town out. And I thought this would be fantastic to have these twin areas, the East and the West Coast, and combine them into a film.
Well, the relationship of them is absolutely unique visually. We talked before a little bit about the words experimentation and documentation in terms of your thinking about making The Ends of the Earth. Can you elaborate on that?
Well, I knew I was making a film that wasn't very commercial, so I thought I would give myself some freedom to experiment with it. And I wanted to combine documentary techniques and documentary footage that I've collected over the years into this feature framework of this film. So I thought, I'm just going to allow myself to come up with as many ideas as I can and work with the tools that I have at my disposal to combine them into this kind of, fictional documentary hybrid. And I just wanted to see where it would go, and I was constantly adapting the script as I went and adapting to the shooting as I went. And I wanted to bring in political ideas, global warming ideas, and also sort of spiritual ideas as well. And I think having that, both the fictional and the documentary framework, gave me that freedom to do that.
Absolutely. Well, let's talk a little bit about the filmmaking references. Some of our viewers will note that you're referencing a couple of iconic films, Aguirre, The Wrath of God, by Werner Herzog, and also Solaris by Steven Soderbergh, which is a remake of the Tarkovsky film. Can you just briefly tell us a little bit about those influences?
Yeah, I mean, not only do I reference them specifically in the film, but also in the way that I think Herzog in Aguirre, The Wrath of God has a great sense of, a great respect for nature and a journey through nature. And also he's great at shooting just faces of people, and oftentimes just staring at the camera. And the Soderbergh version of Solaris, I think, has a really wonderful sense of awe and wonder about the nature of what's real and what's not real, and memory, and how memory informs the main character's response to his immediate world. And I just kind of kept those in the back of my mind as influences.
Back to the lone wolf idea. Give me one example of a hardship you faced out there in these landscapes making this movie.
Well, the major one was because I was completely on my own, and you saw that I am an actor in my own film, and I did not have a crew or a camera person doing that. I set up the camera myself and then put myself in front of the camera. Then I would go back and I would check the shot. The main interesting problem I had was out in the location in the desert, which you'll see in the film. I went out there, and in one afternoon, I set up my tent and my whole apparatus, and I shot my scenes, and then I spent the night out in this basic desert landscape with coyotes howling through the night, and woke up the next morning and shot my morning shots. And basically in a 24-hour period out in this desert, I got everything I needed.
Amazing.
So I set it up, shot it, tore it down, and got out of there.
That's fantastic. All right, now we're going to take a look at the trailer for The Ends of the Earth. Let me ask you, time, the past, the present, the future, inform the structure of the story of what we just saw a great deal. Mm-hmm. Can you elaborate on that a little bit as the person who put all this together?
Well, it's important when making a science fiction film, when you don't want to use any CGI or special effects at all, that you keep the time relatively close to the present, so you're not forced to come up with, space suits and ray guns and lasers and things like that.
Right.
And so I wanted to have the nearest present be close enough to where it's actually an imaginable scenario that we can have this biological plague. And then the sort of underground scenes, again, I didn't want to make them too extensive in terms of art direction and whatnot, so I had to keep those fairly claustrophobic. And then the further in the future scene out in the desert landscape, my main goal was that I couldn't show any real signs of human civilization at all, so I had to pick a location that had no telephone poles or satellites or beacons or fence posts or anything like that. So I was constantly thinking about that, but it was also a little bit twisty in how I tried to reconnect everything. And a lot of that came through in the editing, but I also had to be very, very clear in the script about where we were and locating people with the on-screen time date stamps.
Let's go back to the idea of art direction in it. The technology in the future and in the past has a particular quality to it in the film. How did you come about deciding on what it would look like, how it would function?
Well, you know, we talked about influences earlier, and one of my main influences was a sci-fi film called Primer, which won Sundance in 2004. And the director of that, Shane Carruth, did a fantastic job of creating a time machine out of stuff you could get at Lowe's hardware, basically. And I took that as my same idea. Plus, I had a lot of video technology at my disposal that I thought, you know, if I adapt this in a certain way, it can look like machines that people might use, you know, in a scientific way too, and some gadgets that people aren't really familiar with. Another film that influenced me was Alien. There's a great scene in Alien where they're tracking the progress of the alien through a spaceship, and someone's holding a box that...
And it's the dot that's moving.
Yeah, yeah, and it looks, and it's just a quick shot of it, and it looks like nothing.
Right.
But here it is, it's like this thing that really has this very dramatic effect in the film, and I thought, if Ridley Scott can do that with Alien, I think I can do that with Ends of the Earth.
And that device, the communication device that is a bit like a chunky mini laptop, sort of serves that function in the film.
Well, and you also, if you think of a film like Planet of the Apes, there's a scene in that movie where they've crash landed on the planet, which of course turns out to be Earth. And these guys pull out all of these props out of their bag that look like little satellite things, and they look like the cheapest cardboard props ever. If you don't show a close-up of it, nobody's really going to know. It's just to fill in the atmosphere and the environment. It's not really that important that you see the thing functioning.
Right. Context and usage.
Exactly.
Really, that's what it's all about.
Yeah.
Russ, you live here in the Pacific Northwest. You have a background as a documentary filmmaker, but you're clearly moving into a new phase in your career, telling stories in a unique way. Can you tell us a little bit about that life now, how you got to this place, and what your plans are for the future?
Well, I'm not interested in doing sort of mainstream commercial type of films. I want to do things that feel like they're different than a lot of the other Northwest films that are being made, which are good. They're relationship films, and they're mainly involving more young people. I want to be a little bit more experimental and make films that are also more genre centric. That's why I chose the sci-fi idea. So I've got some, I've got some ideas to make a film. I'd like to make a film maybe about an eco-terrorist. I've also got some documentary ideas that might take us out of the country. But the main thing I want to do is retain my own freedom as a filmmaker. I think like a painter who can paint a painting in their apartment by themselves, I'd like to continue to try to make films, on my own as much as I can, not because I hate people, but but just because that gives me more freedom to explore my own ideas and to see how I can manipulate images and sound and script without having to get a lot of other influences and input that sort of might corrupt that vision.
Well, you certainly worked out on this film a way to make films in a new way, and it's worked for you. So, I mean, I think it's going to be great to see what you do next and to sort of keep to that idea.
Thanks.
So, Russ, I want to thank you so much for joining us here on Backstory. Absolutely fascinating, and congratulations on the film. Thank you also for watching Backstory. I am Andrew Tsao, and I will see you behind the scenes.